The reason we've come to the conference is because we're trying to educate everybody about what mediation is. Our goal is to have it, to help and encourage it to be included in the final protocols on every section where they have a dispute resolution portion, and so that, that it will say, instead of as it does now, it says if there's a dispute, you can litigate, you can arbitrate, or you can negotiate. We want them to add mediate or conciliate. So that's what our purpose is in being here.
That's kind of interesting. Why isn't mediation in there? Mediation strikes me as a particularly effective form of resolving disputes. Why wasn't it in there from the start, Greg?
Well, it's a good question. If you look at Article 14 of the UN Convention that came out of Rio 20 years ago, it, as Susie says, stipulates negotiation or go to the International Court of Justice or go to arbitration. And then the Kyoto Protocol, Article 19, says the same thing. But some of the UN treaties, like the Antarctic Treaty, much more specific, and it mentions dialogue, mediation, informal problem solving. And so we wondered that same question. I've asked that of a number of the delegates, and certainly we've asked that of a number of the committee chairs, and their answer is that this is an issue that they think should be considered. Now, to be fair to them, they have a lot of big issues to consider. And so to focus on conflict resolution and mediation, we think the time will come when that will become a topic that will deserve more attention.
Does the fact that climate change is clearly an issue which affects everyone, Susie, does that mean that it's slightly different dynamic when it comes to mediation? Because whoever's going to mediate, they may already have a vested interest.
Well, it would be a slightly different dynamic. The process of mediation, the way it normally works is you need a neutral third party, and then the kind of mediations that I have done have been with small groups of people. So whether it's divorce family mediation or employer-employee or victim-offender, it's usually small groups, not more than 10 or 12 in the room. But the process, having the neutral third party who's a good listener and knows how to help people talk with each other so they can express what their interests are, and getting them from positions to interests, helps to make things work. Greg has a lot more experience with the larger groups, and I think that's really what your question is about. I'd rather have him take that portion of the question.
Yeah, Greg, take it on. How do you get a neutral mediator when everyone has a stake?
It's a real good question. You have to be impartial or neutral on the issues involved, not take sides with one particular interest or another interest. You have to make sure that the process is one of credibility and integrity. I've often said that when I facilitate big multi-party disputes, maybe 50 stakeholders involved, I'm an advocate for a fair, transparent, and accessible process. And I take on the role more of a facilitator than I do a mediator, because when you bring 50 or 100 people into the same room and you try to see if you can work together to reach some degree of consensus, it's a real challenge, and we certainly see that at the climate talks. I mean, to try to bring 194 plus countries to agreement poses great challenges for the negotiators themselves, and certainly all the people who are chairing and facilitating the informal consultations, the contact groups, and so on.
I guess it's interesting because even this week we've had problems in one of the negotiating tracks, the LCA, because some people have suggested the Saudi Arabian chairman has not been, well, we can't say he's not been impartial, but they certainly, some people feel that the text he's delivered is perhaps less than helpful. What advice could you give him, Susie, in terms of not focusing in on that text, but it's difficult, isn't it, when you have so many people at stake to really keep that middle line, tread that middle line?
I'm going to say that because we're here as mediators beyond borders, and because we're here as totally neutral, I'd prefer just to answer questions. Maybe Greg feels differently, but about mediation in general, and not deal with anything specific that has to do with
absolutely. But in terms of someone who has to really tread a middle line, as a mediator does, and that respect both sides, I guess what I'm asking is, how difficult is that?
Oh, well, I think what you want to do is get both all the parties talking, and help them to hear each other, and that's a process that has to do with rephrasing. So when somebody says something that's rather positional, then it's up to the neutral third-party mediator to phrase that in a different way so that it doesn't sound so positional. It sounds more like an interest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
You raise an interesting case about the LCA here. I've been asked that by some people when they come by our Mediators Beyond Borders booth. And it strikes me that a group that's gotten off to a good start this week is the ADP, the Ad Hoc Working Group on the Durban Platform, which has co-chairs. And for example, it's not quite the same, but when I facilitate these large groups, I have partners. I have a co-facilitator, and I can run ideas by my co-facilitator, and I'm guessing that the co-chairs of the ADP are probably doing that. And that may be an answer as to issues as difficult as the one the LCA is facing. It could be that no person in the chair role would be able to please everyone, but perhaps co-chairs, where they could run ideas by each other before bringing them to the large group, might be an improvement.
It's interesting, I guess, sort of finishing, but key to mediation is to keep on talking, isn't it? But it doesn't necessarily ensure a fast conclusion, nor a conclusion that maybe is entirely perfect for all parties. So is that how do you sell that, Susie? Because in a sense, many people want this clear-cut solution in the climate field, but also many other fields in life. How do you sell to them the idea that actually mediation, it might not be perfect, but it has a role to play?
I don't know that we sell that. What we try to do is to have everybody get all the ideas out, all the interests out, all the facts out, and then when everything's out, even the emotions, that's a very important part of this too, because people have some hidden feelings, and that needs to come out too, and a good mediator will be a very good listener and help to spot when somebody has an emotion or something that's rankling underneath. When all that comes out, then there's certainly a certain time, there comes a time when everybody's sort of hearing each other, and it's sort of a magical moment, and it's difficult with more and more people, but that when they start really talking together and putting together an agreement that they can all be happy with.
And I think I'd add that one of the real strengths of a mediation process is the parties themselves are still empowered.
Yeah.
No one is making the decision for them. And we know that some people get frustrated that the climate change negotiations don't proceed at a faster pace, but it's important to remember that everyone has a voice, that everyone's ideas matter. And a good mediator is going to try to bring those ideas out, maintain a fair, open, and accessible process. And that's certainly something that people are committed to here at the climate change negotiations.